There are stories that don't begin with "once upon a time." They begin with a whisper, a promise sown into the silence of the cosmos, an utterance so quiet only faith could perceive it, like a single, deep note resonating before the symphony of time begins. Picture it. An old man, Abraham, standing beneath a canopy of night, his weathered skin a roadmap of long journeys, reflecting the cold light of stars he could never hope to count. And then, a voice that came not from the wind, nor from the shifting sands, but from the very fabric of reality, from the space between the stars. It promised the impossible, a paradox that defied all laws of biology. From his aged body, a lineage more numerous than the golden dust at his feet and the celestial diamonds above his head would be born. In that moment, an invisible pebble was cast into the still lake of time, creating ripples of destiny that would lap against shores Abraham could never imagine. We often think of history as a straight line, a sequence of events marching forward, an arrow shot from the past, through the present, and into the future. But what if it isn't a line at all? What if history is a gallery of echoes, a collection of divine blueprints drawn by a great architect, and every life, every nation, every empire that rises and falls is but a repetition, an interpretation, a fulfillment of those ancient primary patterns? Tonight, we will not merely recount the story of the 12 tribes of Israel. That is too simple a task. Instead, we will listen for their echoes, for the frequencies that still vibrate in the air we breathe. We will explore 12 blueprints of destiny, 12 spiritual archetypes that have shaped not only one nation, but perhaps the very struggles, desires, and deepest fears of your own journey. Because the real question isn't, who were the 12 tribes? The more terrifying, more profound, more personal question is this: is one of those ancient blueprints being etched into your very soul? Is your life, with its triumphs and its tragedies, its moments of faith and its nights of doubt, merely a single note in the grand symphony that began with a whisper in a desert thousands of years ago? Is your search for meaning an echo of Jacob's longing? Is your brokenness a shadow of his struggle by the river? Our journey begins here, not with an army or a kingdom, but with something far more powerful, far more primordial: a blueprint. The first and most foundational design, the blueprint of life from a place that was seemingly dead forever. Join me as we turn the first page in this ledger of destiny, where a laugh of disbelief is about to be transformed into a world-shaking miracle. The first divine blueprint was not carved on the stoic tablets of Mount Sinai. It was woven quietly, intimately, inside a womb that had grown barren, in the silence of a life that had moved past its spring. Look at Sarah, 90 years old, a length of time sufficient to bury all hope, to turn the fervent prayers of youth into the resigned silence of old age. When she overheard the promise that she herself would hold a son, she laughed. It was a hidden laugh behind the tent flap. It was not the sound of joy, but the sound of a person who knew the cruelty of unfulfilled longing too well, the laugh of a parched desert hearing a promise of rain. It was the laugh of impossibility. Have you ever found yourself in Sarah's tent? A place where your past seems to have bolted every door to the future. A place where hope feels like a cruel luxury. An internal desert where you are convinced no seed can ever sprout. The birth of Isaac, therefore, was not merely a biological miracle. It was a cosmic declaration. It was the blueprint of life from the void. The Creator deliberately chose the most barren, most hopeless place on earth, a 90-year-old womb, to plant the seed of a nation. It was to demonstrate, unequivocally, that his creative power is most perfectly displayed where human strength and logic come to an end. Isaac, his name literally meaning laughter, transformed Sarah's bitter laugh of doubt into the astonished, tear-filled laughter of pure joy. But every divine blueprint must be tested by fire. It demands a trial, a moment where the silence is more terrifying than any sound, a test that would make the heavens themselves hold their breath. On the lonely peak of Mount Moriah, Abraham, the father who had waited a century for this child of laughter, now faced an unimaginable command. The flint knife glittering in his hand did not just threaten the fragile life of Isaac, it threatened the very promise itself, the very foundation of the covenant. Feel the profound stillness on that mountain, the wind whistling through the rocks like a sigh, the frantic beating of a father's heart, each pulse a wordless question. This was not a cruel test of loyalty. This was the moment the blueprint was etched into eternal history. The greatest blessings sometimes demand the greatest surrender, a total release. As Abraham raised his hand, he was not just offering his only son, he was placing the entire future, his own reason, his human understanding of right and wrong, upon that altar. And at that absolute apex of obedience, when the knife was a breath away from its target, a voice ripped through the silence. A ram, a symbol of divine provision, was caught in a nearby thicket. Life was once again given from the jaws of death. The blueprint was sealed. The covenant was signed in blood, not the blood of the promised child, but the blood of a substitute. This pattern would echo forever down the corridors of time. It whispers an eternal truth that sometimes you must journey to the very edge of loss to discover where true provision lies. The echo of Isaac, the echo of life from the void, was now released. But to whom would it be passed? The answer lay in the violent struggle of a pair of twins, a war that began in the darkness of their mother's womb. The world, then and now, pays homage to the firstborn. The strong one, the first one, the obvious heir by human law. Esau was the embodiment of this. He came first, a rugged hunter, a man of the earth, of action, of physical prowess. Everything about him screamed ruler. But the current of the divine covenant does not follow the riverbeds dug by human tradition. It seeks a different kind of pulse, a deeper, more passionate resonance. Now, look at Jacob, the second-born, the one who, in a symbolic act, was born grasping his brother's heel, as if trying to pull him back, to get ahead. History has often labeled him with unflattering names, a trickster, a supplanter. But what if we look deeper, past the surface-level judgments? What truly motivates a man to trade a simple bowl of stew for an invisible inheritance, a birthright he cannot eat or wear? It was not mere cunning, it was a different kind of hunger, it was desire. Jacob is the blueprint of burning desire. He is the archetype of the soul that is never satisfied with the things of this world. While Esau, in his physical hunger, despised his birthright, something he could not see or taste, Jacob saw its invisible aura. He craved it with an intensity that was almost frightening, a laser-like focus. He was willing to scheme, to wrestle, to become despised in the eyes of others, all for a chance to touch something that belonged to the spiritual realm. Ask yourself this: have you ever desired something sacred, a sense of peace, a clear calling, a moment of true forgiveness, with such intensity that you were willing to risk your reputation, your comfort, the approval of the world? The scene of Jacob wrapping goatskins on his arms and neck, trembling as he enters his blind father's tent, is not a story of a successful con. It is a living portrait of a soul risking everything for a blessing. He may have smelled like Esau, but his heart was beating with the rhythm of a different legacy, a legacy of the stars. And when Isaac, though suspicious, laid his trembling hands upon him and spoke the powerful words of blessing, destiny was transferred. A great transaction had occurred, sealed not by strength, but by desperate longing. Why would a righteous God allow this? Perhaps because he is not looking for complacent children, content with their positions. He is looking for hearts on fire, for souls who are hungry and thirsty for his presence, those who are willing to wrestle for it. Jacob got the blessing, but it came at an immediate price: safety. He had to flee the murderous rage of his brother, becoming a penniless exile. The seed of blessing had been planted, but it would only germinate through a long journey of loneliness, fear, and hardship. That journey would lead him to a desolate place with a stone for a pillow where the heavens would open. But before he could build the house of God, he had to confront the darkness, not the darkness of the desert, but the darkness within his own soul, in a fateful encounter by a midnight river where he would fight for his very identity. There are nights in every life that are not for sleep or for dreaming. They are nights of confrontation, nights when all the fears, all the past mistakes, all the insecurities you have tried to outrun or bury, suddenly turn back, take physical form, and face you. That night, by the river Jabbok, Jacob's entire past, his deceit, his fear, his guilt, crystallized into a single, wrestling opponent. A struggle began. But make no mistake, this was no ordinary brawl. This was spiritual surgery, performed without a scalpel. This was the moment the blueprint of transformation through pain was being mercilessly and beautifully carved into his very being. Imagine that fight, stretching from dusk until the first hint of dawn. Not a single word exchanged, only the sound of gasping breaths, the strain of muscle against muscle, the mix of sweat and dust under the pale moonlight. Jacob, the man who had spent his life using his wits and cunning to gain the upper hand, was now facing a power he could not outsmart, a strength he could not overcome. He could have given up. He could have run, as was his instinct. But in that night of utter desperation, in his complete exhaustion, something inside the man shifted. The selfish desire of his youth had now matured into the holy persistence of a broken man. He was no longer fighting to win. He was fighting to hold on. He clung to his opponent, not with aggression, but with a kind of sacred desperation. And from the depths of his being, he uttered the words that would redefine a nation and become a prayer for all time. I will not let you go unless you bless me. Do you hear the change? That is no longer the voice of a deceiver trying to steal a blessing. It is the cry of a soul who has finally realized that a true blessing cannot be stolen. It must be bestowed, and it is only bestowed through surrender, even in the midst of struggle. And then a strange thing happened. The mysterious being touched the socket of Jacob's hip. A simple touch, yet it sent a searing pain through him, dislocating it. He had prevailed, yet he was wounded for life. Why? Why injure him at the very moment of his victory? Because this is the heart of this blueprint. True, deep transformation always leaves a scar. The limp was not a punishment. It was an everlasting mark, a permanent reminder that his new strength came not from himself, but from his weakness, touched and sanctified by God. He would walk with a limp from that day forward, but for the first time in his life, his soul stood tall. Your name will no longer be Jacob, the being declared. It will be Israel. A new name, a new identity, a new nation, born not from a triumphant victory, but from a midnight struggle and a holy breaking. Israel, one who struggles with God and overcomes. The pattern was now set. To receive a new identity from heaven, you must be willing to wrestle in the dark, to cling to the divine, and to walk away with the humble scar of that encounter. But the blueprint for the nation of Israel needed more than one limping man. It needed 12 pillars, and one of them, a pillar that seemed rotted by sin and betrayal, was about to be miraculously transformed into the very foundation of kingship. Look closely at Judah. His name means praise, but for a long portion of his life, his actions were anything but praiseworthy. Let us not forget. It was he, not another, who made the cold, pragmatic suggestion in the desert. What will we gain if we kill our brother? Come, let's sell him. A suggestion of callous practicality, trading his own flesh and blood for a handful of silver coins and a clean conscience. An act that unleashed tragedy, broke his father's heart, and left an indelible scar on the family's soul. We, in our modern world, still tend to believe that leadership belongs to the clean, the flawless, the ones with perfect records. But the story of redemption, in its profound wisdom, tells a different story. It tells of the blueprint of redemptive kingship, a royalty born not from perfection, but from brokenness and restoration. Years later, in that foreign Egyptian palace, facing a powerful official they do not recognize, Judah is confronted with a fateful choice. This time, it is not Joseph, but Benjamin, the youngest brother, the last comfort of their old father, who is in jeopardy. History seems to be repeating itself with cruel irony. The wheel of fate has spun back to its starting point. Will Judah once again sacrifice a brother to save himself and the others? In that suffocating silence, a miracle occurred in Judah's soul. The echo of his past betrayal was drowned out by a new, more powerful sound, the sound of responsibility and love. He stepped forward. This time he made no pragmatic suggestion. He did not plead for mercy. He did not blame circumstances. He offered himself. "Please, my lord," he said to the vizier, his voice trembling but resolute, "let your servant remain here as my lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would overwhelm my father." Do you see the complete transformation? The brother who once sold a sibling for profit was now willing to sell himself to save one. This is more than a momentary act of courage. This is the birth of a royal design. True leadership, the kind recognized by heaven, is not about standing over others to command them. It is about being willing to stand in the place of others to bear their consequences. In that moment, the invisible crown was placed upon Judah's head. The prophecy that Jacob would later speak on his deathbed, "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet," was sealed not by birthright, but by this single act of sacrificial love. The Lion of the tribe of Judah possessed not only the strength to tear apart its enemies, its true royal quality was the strength to protect and sacrifice for its own. This is the archetype that Israel's greatest kings, like David, would follow. This is the echo that would lead to the throne of an even greater king, one who would come not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Judah, the betrayer, found redemption and became the father of kings. But the brother he once betrayed, Joseph, was living out a different blueprint, an even more dramatic and spectacular design, the journey from the deepest pit to the highest pinnacle of glory. Joseph's life reads like a dramatic fairy tale: the favored son, the betrayed brother, the slave, the prisoner, and finally, the prime minister of the most powerful empire on earth. On the surface, it is a dizzying series of unpredictable fortunes and misfortunes. But if we look with the eyes of faith, we see something else entirely. This is not randomness. It is a choreographed journey. This is the blueprint of glory from the grave. Consider the three locations, the three stages that defined him: the pit, the prison, and the palace. These were not arbitrary settings. They were three acts of a sacred design for salvation, a pattern that would repeat in other great stories to come. First, the pit. When his brothers threw him in, they thought they were burying his dreams. In reality, they were unwittingly planting them. The pit is the symbol of burial. It is where the arrogant ego of the young boy, the one who boasted of his dreams, had to die. The only light was a small, distant circle, a faint reminder of a world he no longer belonged to. Have you ever felt thrown into a pit of failure, of betrayal, a place where your ego was crushed and you were left for dead? This pattern teaches that sometimes burial is the necessary first step for resurrection. Second, the prison. This is the stage of being forgotten. After being falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, Joseph was cast into the dungeon. There, he remained faithful, interpreting dreams for the cupbearer and the baker, only to be forgotten for 2 long years. The prison is the test of faith when no one is watching, when every effort seems to go unnoticed. It is where character is forged in silence and shadow. It is where God tests to see if you will remain faithful when he seems to be silent. Man's forgetting is often God's preparation. And finally, the palace. When Pharaoh had a dream that no one could interpret, the cupbearer suddenly remembered Joseph. From the depths of the prison, he was brought directly to the heights of power. Why? Because in the darkness, he had learned to hear God's voice. His ability to interpret dreams was not an innate talent, it was the fruit of a faith tested by fire. He didn't just see the dream, he saw God's blueprint within the coming events. The palace is the stage of exaltation, but this glory was not for his own sake. It was to save an entire world from famine, including the very brothers who had betrayed him. When he finally revealed himself and said, "It was not you who sent me here, but God," he showed that he had fully understood the blueprint. He had transformed his personal pain into communal salvation. And the reward for this faithfulness, a double portion. His father Jacob adopted his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, as his own, giving Joseph a double share of the inheritance. This is the final echo of this blueprint. God does not just restore what was lost, he repays with interest. He turns the years the locusts have eaten into a harvest of abundance. While Joseph lived out the pattern of individual redemption, another of his brothers, Levi, was about to become the focus of a different design, a blueprint for the transformation of an entire lineage, where a terrible curse could be turned into a holy calling. In the symphony of destiny, there are jarring notes, dissonant chords. The story of Levi begins as one such chord. Listen to the prophecy, or rather the curse, that his father Jacob pronounced upon him and his brother Simeon. "I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel." A harsh judgment. Why? Because of their rage, because of the savage massacre they perpetrated at Shechem in revenge for their sister. Their anger was described as fierce, and their fury as cruel. The curse to be scattered and dispersed seemed like a death sentence for the tribe's future. They would have no unified territory, no single plot of land to call their own. They were destined to be fragmented, to fade into obscurity. This is a pattern we all fear, to be defined by our worst mistake, to be permanently trapped in the consequences of a past, impulsive action. But the story of Levi is a powerful testament to one of the most astonishing principles of the spiritual universe. It is the blueprint of calling from a curse. It is a design that shows how the great architect can write straight on the most crooked lines that humanity has drawn. Generations later, at the foot of Mount Sinai, a great crisis of faith erupted. While Moses was on the mountain receiving the 10 Commandments, the people below grew impatient. They forged a golden calf and began to worship it, breaking the covenant almost as soon as it was made. The entire camp descended into chaos and idolatry. In the midst of that chaos, Moses stood at the entrance to the camp and issued a thunderous call, "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." In the long silence that followed that call, who answered? It was not the future royal tribe of Judah. It was not the powerful tribes of Joseph's descendants. It was the sons of Levi. The entire tribe gathered around Moses, swords strapped to their sides. Do you see the divine irony here? The very instruments of cruelty, the swords they had once wielded in personal, vengeful rage, were now about to be wielded for the sake of God's holiness. Their zeal, the very trait that was cursed when it served their own fury, was now celebrated when it served the purity of the covenant. They obeyed Moses' command, purging the camp of the ringleaders of the rebellion. And what was their reward for this act of loyalty? A spectacular reversal of destiny. God declared that the tribe of Levi would be set apart. They would receive no land as an inheritance like their brothers. Why? Because, as God stated, "I am their portion and their inheritance." The curse to be scattered was miraculously redefined. They were indeed dispersed throughout Israel, not as a punishment, but as a blessing. They were given 48 cities, scattered within the territories of the other tribes, so that they could be everywhere, teaching the law, performing the rites, and reminding the entire nation of the presence of God. Their scattering became a sacred presence. Their curse became their unique calling. This blueprint whispers a profound hope to each of us, that the very character trait that once got you into the most trouble, the very mistake that once brought you the most shame, when surrendered and placed under God's authority, can become the very foundation of your most powerful and unique calling. The pillars were now shaped. The individual blueprints were set. It was time to look at the larger picture, at how these different shades and tones blended to create a complex symphony. When we think of the 12 tribes of Israel, it is easy to see them simply as demographic groups, administrative units on a map. But that is to see in black and white what was created in vibrant color. The architect of the universe does not create duplicates. He composes a symphony. The 12 tribes were not just 12 groups of people. They were 12 notes, 12 shades of the soul, 12 distinct vibrational frequencies. Each tribe carried a piece of the divine DNA, a unique character, a specific calling, and only when combined did they form the complete, complex and beautiful harmony of the nation of Israel. This is the Symphony of 12 Shades. Listen to the notes. There are low notes and high notes, major chords and minor chords. Hear the echo of Reuben, the firstborn. He was described as unstable as water. He is the note of raw potential, of primary strength. But his lack of discipline, his impulsiveness, meant he could not excel. He is a reminder that the greatest potential, without self-control, evaporates like mist. Hear the royal trumpet of Judah. This is the note of leadership, of power, of courage, a regal, powerful melody that would define the line of kings. But as we have seen, this melody only becomes perfect when it is underscored by the chord of redemptive sacrifice. Listen to the rich, abundant harmony of Joseph, doubled through his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. These are the notes of prosperity, of the double blessing, of widespread influence. Their melody speaks of restoration, of receiving back more than what was lost. Ephraim, the younger son blessed above the older, becomes a dominant theme, so much so that its name is sometimes used for the entire northern kingdom. And then there is the sacred silence. That is Levi. They have no land, no earthly melody. They are the silence between the notes, the necessary space that allows the other melodies to be heard distinctly. They are holiness, the presence of the sacred, keeping the entire symphony from becoming profane. Then there are the other notes, each with its own timbre. Zebulun, settled by the sea, is the note of commerce, of connection to the nations. Issachar, who understood the times, is the note of wisdom, of scholarship, of knowing when to act. Dan, likened to a serpent by the roadside, is the note of judgment, of unexpected strategy. Gad, a tribe of warriors, is the percussive, driving beat of the army. Asher, meaning happy, is the joyful melody of abundance, of royal delicacies. Naphtali, a doe set free, is the note of freedom and beautiful words. And Benjamin, the smallest tribe, likened to a ravenous wolf, is the note of fierce combativeness, of a strength that belies its size. Do you see? God did not create a monotonous nation. He created a mosaic of personalities, an orchestra of different instruments. Each tribe, with its strengths and its weaknesses, was necessary for the integrity of the whole. Their diversity was not an accident. It was a core part of the design. But what happens when such a beautiful symphony is broken? What happens when the instruments begin to play out of tune, when jealousy and conflict replace harmony? The history of Israel was about to enter a tragic movement, where this perfect design would be shattered into pieces. Imagine a perfect mirror, exquisitely crafted, reflecting a single image, a single covenant. That was the unified kingdom of Israel under David and Solomon. One people, one God, one temple. The symphony seemed to be at its glorious peak. But then, pride, compromise with foreign gods, and oppression created invisible fractures. After Solomon's death, those fractures shattered. The shock of division reverberated through the nation. The perfect mirror was dropped, and it broke. 10 large pieces flew to the north, 2 remained in the south. The unified design had become the shattered blueprint. The northern kingdom, comprising 10 tribes, kept the name Israel, but they had lost its soul. They built their own rival centers of worship, placing golden calves upon their altars, a sad echo of their past sin. They cut themselves off from the temple in Jerusalem, from the line of David, and most importantly, from the pure presence of the covenant. Prophets like Elijah, Amos, and Hosea were sent, their voices like desperate warnings, pleading with them to return. But their words fell on the deaf ears of a nation drunk on its false independence and temporary prosperity. And then the inevitable judgment came. In 722 BC, the brutal Assyrian Empire, like a colossal sandstorm from the north, swept down and engulfed the kingdom of Israel. The capital, Samaria, fell after a 3-year siege. But the Assyrians did not just conquer. Their policy was erasure. They conducted a massive, forced deportation, uprooting the 10 tribes from their promised land and scattering them to the farthest, most obscure corners of their empire. The shards of the mirror were scattered to the winds. This is the moment the tragic phrase, "the 10 lost tribes," was born. Lost. Ponder that word. It evokes an image of complete disappearance, of an identity erased, of bloodlines dissolved into the vast sea of other nations. Their names, their language, their memory seem to have vanished into the mists of history. The fragments of the mirror now lay scattered somewhere in the darkness, reflecting nothing. A century later, the southern kingdom, Judah, did not escape a similar fate. They too turned from the covenant, and the Babylonian Empire came, burning the temple, destroying Jerusalem, and carrying the remnant into exile. Now, the entire blueprint seemed to be utterly shattered. It seemed to be over. The promise to Abraham looked like a cruel cosmic joke. This creates one of the greatest and most compelling mysteries of all time. Where are those scattered shards? Did they truly disappear forever? Can a blueprint drawn by the hand of God himself be completely destroyed by human disobedience? Or does being lost to the eyes of men mean something different to the eyes of the architect? Could there be a plan to find and reassemble these pieces? The answer lies not in the records of historians, but in the hope-filled whispers of the prophets who saw a dawn beyond the long night of exile. In the ashes of collapse, in the silence of exile, when all hope seemed to be extinguished, a new voice began to rise through the prophets. A voice that spoke not of the judgment that was past, but of the restoration that was to come. A restoration not just for the 2 tribes of Judah, but for the whole house of Israel. The great architect was not finished. The shattered blueprint was not the final chapter. It was only a painful, transitional one. The final chapter is titled, "The Promise of Reassembly." Listen to the incredible promise given through the prophet Ezekiel. God declared he would take one stick, representing Judah, and another stick, representing Joseph and the northern tribes, and he would join them into a single stick in his hand. "I will make them one nation in the land. They will never again be 2 nations, or be divided into 2 kingdoms." This is not just a promise of political unity. It is a promise to heal a historical wound, to reassemble a broken family. This reassembly is not just about gathering people. It is about reassembling the shattered blueprint. Look at the vision of the Valley of Dry Bones, an image of absolute death and despair. "These bones are the whole house of Israel," God declared. They say, "Our bones are dried up, and our hope is gone." But God commanded his breath to enter those bones, and they came to life, a vast army. This is a picture of a restoration even greater than the exodus from Egypt. It is a resurrection from the dead, a recreation from nothing. So, where are the shards of the mirror, the lost tribes? History and legend have offered countless theories. There are communities in Ethiopia, India, Afghanistan, who hold to ancient customs and believe they are the descendants of these vanished tribes. Perhaps the winds of history blew these shards to the farthest corners of the globe, where they were preserved in quiet obscurity, waiting. Even in the New Testament, their memory lingers. The prophetess Anna is introduced as being from the tribe of Asher, one of the 10 northern tribes. This proves that even in the time of Jesus, not all was forgotten. But the final, definitive answer lies in the book of Revelation. In the ultimate vision of the end times, the Apostle John sees 144,000 who are sealed, and the list names 12,000 from every tribe: Reuben, Judah, Dan, Asher, Naphtali. All are present and accounted for. The names the world thought were erased are spoken clearly in heaven. The shattered mirror is not just being glued back together, it is being reforged to reflect glory once more. What does this tell us? That in the accounting of heaven, no one is ever truly lost. The architect knows the precise location of every single shard. And that brings us to the final question, the one for you, right here, right now. This story is not a history lesson about the past. It is an invitation for the future. The blueprints of life from the void, of burning desire, of transformation through pain, of redemptive kingship are still echoing. The promise of reassembly is still active. Could it be that you are carrying within you a fragment of one of these ancient blueprints? Is there an echo of Judah, of Joseph, or even of a redeemed Levi in your soul waiting to be called forth? Because the symphony is not over. The conductor is raising his baton, and he is calling every note, every shard from the 4 corners of the earth back to its proper place, so that one day the mirror will be whole, and the symphony will sound in its fullness, with no dissonance, with no missing notes, to reflect and praise the one who designed it all. And the only question that remains is, will you be there?